Hey everyone, welcome back to Stoke Hunters, the podcast that celebrates the pursuit of adventure and the souls who thrive in the great outdoors. Today we're thrilled to feature Kyle Warman, the innovative mind behind Fun Farm, a company that's redefining the landscape of terrain parks across ski hills. From his early days of tinkering in Cold Lake, Alberta, to creating some of the most iconic features for snow sport enthusiasts, Kyle's journey is a testament to passion, creativity, and the relentless pursuit of good days. So please let's welcome Kyle to the stage. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, Jared. Thanks for having me out, man. I like what you're doing.
Yeah, and same. When you reached out and, you wanted to start the chat of like potentially doing stuff with Norquay, and then, that got me following you and seeing all the cool stuff that you've built. It's just been, really cool to see the journey.
Yeah, right on. Appreciate it. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey for sure, to say the least. Yeah. I always refer to like Calgary and the foothills area as the Canadian Hollywood. Everyone comes here with hopes and dreams and usually just go under the rug or by the wayside, or they turn and burn the other way back to where it's easier to make money. Things are a little bit cheaper, not quite as hard.
So, yeah. Well, it's always interesting to hear from some people like how Alberta's expensive or this or that, whereas like sometimes or not sometimes, but like I constantly hear from people or in like the news, people like, oh, Alberta's so cheap and like Ontario is so expensive, or BC. But I think it's very relative to which direction you're coming from. Like Alberta,
yeah, absolutely.
People, and
yeah,
as we continue to see with inflation, things get more and more expensive.
Yeah, totally right. And it just gets passed on to the consumer. Hey, so
yeah. Every time something gets more expensive for a company, unfortunately, we got to pass it along to the consumer. We're not.
Yeah, we got to start working smarter, more efficient, try and keep those costs down, right? Yeah.
Or
nobody wants like 3. Yeah, nobody wants 3% profit margins. That's no good. We got to up those numbers a little bit.
Yeah, billion % profit margin.
Yeah, totally. That's what it feels like going out riding lately, anyways.
Oh yeah, and I always want the new shiny thing or the new bike or the new technology, and things aren't cheap.
Yeah, right. And then they just dangle that carrot in front of you, like, for 500 easy payments of $6.99, you can have all of this shiny shit.
Well, on my way home so I have a service dog and he works downtown, so I have to drive one route every day. And there's I forget what it is, but it's like some like company where they let you like rent anything or like pay to own. So it was like buy a couch for $22 a week, and it's like, or no, it was laundry machines, $22 a week, and for 105 weeks.
Oh my, yeah. And there's the sad part is there's people falling for it, right? Like they'll rack up that Canadian Tire credit card, they'll max out that Walmart credit card. Like it's rough.
Well, and there's a credit card for everything now. Like we've bought stuff on Amazon and they've sent us like, hey, do you want the Amazon credit card? I'm like, oh, that's tempting sometimes, because it's like, well, especially they're like, hey, do you want to put it on a credit card? And, you can not have to make payments for 6 months.
Yeah. Plus you're taking my 3% per transaction. And
yeah.
Right. Yeah. Try not to fall for those kind of tricks anyways.
No, it's nice. Oh, well, I don't know if it's nice. I think it's just like sometimes things get big and then they like do it. Like we bank with Neo, and like on my regular account, I get like 2.5% back, cash back, or not cash back, but like interest on my checking account or whatever. And I'm like, that's way better than my Scotiabank ever was. But like, yeah. I know that like Neo's not some small company. They're $1 billion evaluation. So like they've made money that way of like being good for the little guy, but they're still raking things in the bank.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I've seen some of your features getting built and everything. What kind of sparked your initial passion for the outdoor world of like mountain biking and snowboarding?
When you asked me to start doing this podcast a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I'm not a huge podcast guy. Like I will be honest, right? Like if I'm driving, it's usually, a good playlist or something like that, right? Unless it's like Joey Diaz or something like that, right? Like those funny guys and stuff. But I started thinking about what are we going to do the podcast? What are the questions going to be like? What do I do to not be annoying to the viewers and stuff like that, right? Keep it interesting. And so I went online, did a Google search, and found out a couple things. And what I found out was every good story needs to have a beginning, middle, and end. A good guy, a bad guy, somewhat educational and keep it light and funny. Okay.
Yeah.
So on that note, you're asking me the question of how did I get into snowboarding and action sports and all of that kind of stuff. I think it happens same as a lot of young guys. Like I grew up watching like the Crusty Demons of Dirt videos and all sorts of stuff like that, like on a VHS, right? Like, and I really miss those days for the young generation. It was a big ordeal when a 45-minute video came out of just, you know, dirt bikes and mountain bikes and partying and just like driving fast and big jumps and like, you know, the gnarly injuries and stuff like that, right? So like you were hyped up, man. So it all kind of started. My dad definitely built us the first ramp because my dad, you know, he works oil fields and stuff like that. So he would, you know, leave for work and early in the morning, and we would have been out riding our bikes super late where we lived. And I'm sure at 4:30 in the morning when he's up, he goes to drive out of the driveway and he's you know running over our mountain bikes and whatever bricks and plywood and shit we had all stashed on the fucking driveway. So after that, he was like, okay, you know what, I'll build you a ramp and we'll make it happen. And like, man, we used and abused that ramp. Like my childhood was pretty rad, man. Like my parents made us be respectful, but gave us a pretty long leash as far as sports and buddies and stuff like that. And the spot that I grew up at in Cold Lake was, you know, a block from the marina. So that's what was right there. We lived on a hill on all three sides. We had a huge lot out front, right? So we had tons of room to ride bikes and have jumps and stuff. We had like one definitely like a core child memory growing up was we always had these Warman ramp jams. Sorry. Here, let's chase that stutter with one of these. There's going to be a few more of them. Sorry. The Warman ramp jams. And there'd be like 30 kids on bikes, you know, middle of summer. Like we'd have like spotlights out and stuff like that. And the kids are just ripping. And there was always that one kid that, you know, you knew all weekend school, like he never rode bikes, he never nothing, but he was going to like bust out of his shell and he was going to hit that jump and he would just, you know, end up going sky wheelie to face plant. My mom would be out there bandaging him up and stuff like that. And that was just how it was. Like the parents didn't really give a shit. Like, you know, they're having fun. They're staying out of trouble. Perfect. So yeah, that's how I kind of ended up getting into it. And then snowboarding and stuff didn't really come later. Right. Like I don't have any real memories of watching snowboarding on TV or seeing something like that. How I actually kind of got into it, there was a Indian kid named Ian, like a native kid, like long hair and stuff like that, right? And he would show up to class sometimes he wouldn't, but the middle school that we were at had this giant hill in the back. So recess and playtime, you're always out there, you know, tobogganing, people bring cross country skis, your GT snow racers, all that kind of stuff. But then one day this Ian kid just had this, I don't know if it was like a Canadian Tire board. I think at the time they were selling like these Airwalk snowboards or something like that. And he was just trying to make friends, and I was just an innocent bystander, and I was kind of like, hey man, like, you want to let me try that thing? And like we built a jump and stuff like that. And that was kind of like the beginning of snowboarding for me. That was the first real board that had actual, like, you know, like ratcheting bindings with the heel and toe strap, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, we'd be like, hey, you want to meet after school and go snowboarding again? So that was the real intro to it. And then a couple years later doing that, it's actually kind of a funny story. I got caught stealing from the Max store. Okay. So I stole something at a chocolate bar, some shit like that. So, and I was like the last one out of all my friends to do it, right? You're in like grade 8, right? And you're walking home from school and everyone's doing it. And buddy comes out and I got like an O. Henry bar, whatever. And I was like, I'm not doing that. So then a couple of weeks goes by, we get into peer pressure. So I'm like, fuck it. Go in there. I steal this thing. I'm not even at the end of the parking lot yet, you know, like palms are sweaty. I'm tripping balls. The owner, Sam, comes out and he catches me. And I'm just like, oh shit, like this isn't good. Right. So he like basically grabs me by the ear and he knows my parents and stuff and like hauls me back. But he like put me through the fucking ringer, man. Like he called the RCMP, all this stuff. Like I had to write a letter and apologize and everything. I had to do this community service and everything. But like I was used to like working really hard already, right? Like that was a job growing up, right? My dad was in the oil field, so you were in charge of, you know, raking the leaves, shoveling, you know, fixing the deck if something broke, whatever, right? So I start doing my a couple weekends of community service, they called it, and like I was killing it, man. Like I was dusting the shelves and I was making everything nice. I was changing the syrup in the Slurpee machines, the garbage cans, like the titty mags were going out. So I was like, oh yeah, I'll take these and like, whip them in the dumpster, stick a few under there for your friends after and stuff like that. But it worked out really good. Sam was like, you're doing a really good job. Like, do you want like a full-time job? So I was like, oh, sweet. Yeah. So he just started paying me cash. So I go there and I saved up all my money. And at that time, that summer, I bought a Norco 125 mountain bike, right? Like at this time, I was like, that was like a $1,200 bike, right? Like I was the first guy to have like hookworms, single speed conversion, all that kind of stuff, right? Like made it look really nice. So I had a good mountain bike and I was like, I need a snowboard. So I saved up all my money. I bought this board. It was like $250 and I rode that thing backwards for like 3 years, man. My tail was like 4 feet long, sticking out behind me, like just embarrassing. But I was like, this is the sport for me, man. Like I can't get enough of this. Like I can just get a lift from town with the buddy's parents. They just drop me off here and I get food, I get a lift ticket, I can do whatever I want, and I could just hit big jumps. I'm like, this is perfect. So that's kind of how I ended up getting into it. The long and short of it. Yeah.
There's three things out of this that I want to talk about. One is Fun Farm Ramp Jam's going to happen
very soon. I live on Highway 22. So if you're coming from Calgary or Okotoks or whatever like that, so you're heading to Fernie, if you come off of Highway 7 or even through Turner Valley, you drive right past my place, right? I got a big sign on the highway and everything. So the first summer that I was here, me and my business partner at the time, Foster, who also helped me get Fun Farm up off the ground, he went out, and the guy's a G. He bought a big airbag and all that kind of stuff like that. So we had like a big motocross ramp in our yard. We had a couple of guys on bikes come out. There was like, I'm going to butcher their fucking last names, but like Morgan Klisnet come out, Billy Kohut come out, and like we were just partying. We had guys like Sam King come out, and we like there was people stopped on the fucking road, man, on the highway, and we were like jumping the fence and handing out beers. And like at this time, we didn't have a spot for the horses to go either. So the horses, like guys are trying to hit this ramp and these horses are walking by and there's like horse shit on the takeoffs and stuff. So buddy's just like, this is the funny farm. So we just kind of end up sticking with it. So that's how this kind of all came about. But then I don't want to use the C word at all. I'm going to minimize as much as I can, but COVID kind of killed a lot of the forward momentum we had with this.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like I've reached out to, there's a couple really cool organizations in Calgary that are trying to do the hike park thing, right?
Yeah.
So I've reached out to them. There's like YYC hike parks, ours, cousins, all that kind of stuff like that, right? So whenever those guys can get their shit in line, like I basically come up to them with, an unofficial contract saying, what, I have like the money, the resources, the trailers, the skid steer, the rails. I just want the Fun Farm banner on one side of this thing. Just let me know where to drop these things off, and I'll give you guys a hand, right? So yeah, that would be the new version of the Warman ramp jams, I guess.
That's sick. We is our parks Edmonton or is this all YYC?
You're putting me on the spot. I can't remember. I think our parks is definitely Calgary.
Yeah,
I believe.
I think they're, yeah. I'm pretty sure Cousins is Edmonton though.
Nice.
I think so.
Yeah, whoever gets it.
Skateboarding.
Yeah.
Seems like a super rad. For anyone who's listening who hasn't checked them out, like these guys are like building sick community and just having a rad time. Like it's a cool brand. And then, man, those old snowboards. Like I remember, like I don't like anyone who had the bindings with the buckles. Those are the fancy snowboards. I remember the Canadian Tire ones where you just shove your feet into and like no edges and just like pray that you made it down the hill without tumbling.
Yeah, it's one of those scenarios, right? Like if you don't pick an edge, the universe is going to do it for you, right? Because you're just flat base, just risking it all on the line every time you drop in on something like that. Like that's crazy.
Well, I remember now, like, so it's like born in Saskatoon. There's a big hill there, like just on the riverbank, and like probably 100-meter vert and maybe 300 meters, so like pretty steep hill. Like
Yeah.
you'd get going on anything that actually slid, but like, man, these like crappy plastic bases and everything, like it was like painful to try to get them to go down this hill.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Insane.
And then how you got dropped off at the hills back in the day, like that was the same in Saskatoon. Like we had blackstrap 30 minutes out. My parents would just drop me off at the bus pickup and be like, "Okay, have a good day. Don't kill yourself, and we'll come pick you back up at 4:30 in the afternoon when the bus drops you back off."
Yeah, man. Like the hill that I grew up riding is called Kinnessoo Ridge. So you got about a 15-20 minute drive out of town, right? But like I always had buddies and their parents were driving out, or like my parents, whatever, they'd drive us out there, and like, you know, a lift ticket. Like if you got a season's pass, right, at that time, it was definitely affordable. And they had 1 cent popcorn chicken. So for like $5, you were eating like an absolute king. Like you and all your buddies could eat for $5, right? So you'd never see a deal like something like that happen now.
No, God, no. I think popcorn chicken at KFC is like $5 and you get maybe like 15 pieces.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it brings back, well, I never got to experience it because like when I remember dollar drinks, so like highballs, and I remember 75-cent draft, but like everyone would always talk about like 25-cent draft, and I never got to experience quarter draft, but I thought at 75 cents, it was a deal anyways.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. Cheap tequila, cheap highballs, all that stuff. Yeah. Sneaks up on you.
Yeah. So so it's something new. I told you to grab a drink. What are we drinking tonight?
You know what, man? I've been a spice rum and Coke guy for a long time. But trying to get the body in shape. I got to go snowboarding for the first time in like 10 years, which was awesome. I've been battling with a broken leg since 2015. So trying to get the body back in, and so I don't want to kill it by, you know, all that extra sugars and stuff like that. So I'm just on the old fashions. That's what I've been doing for the last little while. So
old fashions are good.
Yeah, I like them.
Like I started getting into like cocktails and stuff a little bit more. Like we got like during COVID, I think everyone got into cocktails or making new drinks or whatever. But because at that time I was working for Labatt, so like Budweiser, Bud Light, but we had like a spirit company called G&W, so like neutral and like they had some whiskeys and stuff, but like then they made some like RTDs and like would send them to us, so we'd have like tastings and everything. And like Negronis are good. Like you'd never think like spirit on spirit would be like something that would mix well, but yeah, you can make some cool stuff with that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And like old fashioned, super simple, like an orange slice, some sugar, and is that about it?
Yeah, pretty much. But you know, it's kind of, I don't want to be like a whiskey snob by any means, right? Because I have the whiskey that I like and I don't change it ever. I'm never going to change it. But like around the holiday season and stuff like that, right? There's, you know, you get a couple of days off. So you want to make sure you go around to all your clients and your customers and, you know, drop off a bottle of rum or a case of beer or whatever they're into and all that kind of stuff. And then this year I got tired of buying, you know, 40 cases of Coors Light. So I bought this super slick briefcase with all the foam with the little cubes in it and stuff like that. So I made an old fashioned kit. So I got a little cooler that has the little square ice cubes in it. It's got the bottle, it's got the torch, it's got all the different wood for fucking smoking them, everything. So you just look like a badass. You walk in, it's all discreet, no one knows what it is. You get in the office, you pop it open, it just it presents well. Like, yeah, it looks really nice. So that's the extent of my bartending, I guess.
That's sick. And it goes a little bit further than, you know, just dropping off a 24 pack.
Totally. Yeah.
And it, you know, it's always interesting because at the time when you're wanting to do something, it always feels like so much work. And then when you actually do it, you're like, oh, this isn't even that much worse. And like the appreciation that people have of like going that little extra step is like mind blowing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Just got to show up and try.
Yeah.
Something like a little bit different.
Like I put in handwritten notes and I'm like, you know, I didn't think anything was special about that. Like, yeah, I say like, you know, I want you to have a good day. And like, you know, I hope you're having a great season. And like people will literally take pictures and reply to it with like Instagram and be like, oh, I just went snowboarding or this or that. And it's like, wow, like nothing revolutionary, but it just makes people feel a little bit extra special. And it's like, yeah, just I don't know. I think it was like, oh man, it would be nice to feel a note. And like now a lot of companies are doing it. But like I saw the worst thing I saw was now someone's made a robot that will write notes out for people. And I'm like, why don't you just like pay like just let someone be the note writer, like have them have fun, or like let them give in like little stupid details, or like, you know, maybe you take cool behind the scenes photos and then write on the back of them and like, hey, this is this, have a great day or something, like just a little bit extra. And like it goes
and
like
if you're to take, you know, extract yourself from that situation. So say you're the company that's giving out those, you know, AI generated notes and stuff like that. Like I would assume if you took that to like a market analyst or something like that, that's probably having some sort of negative effect on your brand. You might have a good product, but the fact that you have a mental note now that this company tried to be sincere and authentic and genuine and care about it, but they were too fucking cheap to just literally handwrite the thing. You know what I mean? And now you're just thinking, oh yeah, another AI note, fucking pitch this, right? Like you don't even remember what the product was, nothing. Right?
yeah.
So either do it or don't do it. Or you're all in or nothing.
I think I think eventually if this robot goes far and everyone starts getting handwritten notes, I think you'll have to start taking like pictures of something, or like, you know, like prove like, because like, you know, the AI note of like, because like it had a pen where it would like write it, so it looked like handwritten.
Oh, it's actually a written note by it.
Yeah, it was a robot that like had a robot.
Okay.
So like
Sorry,
it looked like a handwritten note.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, this is wild that someone like, how much time and effort did you make making this robot do this when like it takes me like, you know, maybe 30 seconds on a bat. Like, yeah, if you like, you know, if you have 1,000 orders, like 30 seconds adds up. But like, I don't know, like, oh, what is, what's it? Do you know them? It's the tea company down in Calgary. Like, they're not organic, but like healthy for you tea with like caffeine and stuff. I think it's like Revitalize tea or something.
Okay.
But yeah, super cool company. Like the founder created it because like his friend, I think, had a heart attack from drinking so many like energy drinks. So he's like, I need to find a way to like have a healthy for you thing. So he made like high energy tea. But his sister's one of the co-founders with him. And like, yeah, she, like, I see it on her LinkedIn. Like they have thousands of orders now. And each time everyone gets still a handwritten note. And I'm like, man, that is like phenomenal.
Yeah. Going above and beyond and showing the actual appreciation for what you actually created, right?
Well, I think a lot of companies take it for granted. Like customers, like they're choosing their hard-earned dollars to give to your company. I think the least you could do is thank them for it. Like, I mean,
yeah,
Amazon
absolutely.
probably doesn't care from billion or customer number billion to customer number 1,000,000,001, but you know, the little guy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I had something, but then it was going to continue the conversation, but
next question.
Yeah, to you next question. But so last episode I had Alexis, she's also known as Gear Girl down in the States, mountain bike person. And so I get everyone to ask a question of the person I'm hosting next. And she wants to know, what brings you the most joy when you're outside?
What brings me the most joy when I'm outside?
Yeah.
What brings you the most joy when I'm outside? Just hanging with the buddies, man. It doesn't matter what we're doing. Like, you know, we do a lot of like enduro biking and stuff like that, right? Like we've gone down to the States and raced enduro events down there and got pretty heavy into like big bike adventure tours and all that kind of stuff as well, right? So, you know, I have like a Honda Africa Twin and you're doing single track on this thing and big gnarly hill climbs with it and stuff like that. And when there comes a time when you're outside and, you know, snowboarding is the same, whether, you know, you're doing big shoots or whatever like that, there's a moment between you and your buddies when you get to a spot and everyone's just, it's like silent. And like, maybe you're taking your helmet off to take a break or whatever, but there's this kind of, you all kind of look at each other and you make eye contact and you all just burst out fucking laughing. You're just like, how did we get from there to over here? Like,
Yeah.
one, these bikes don't belong here. These snowboards shouldn't have been here. There was a couple ropes we probably shouldn't have gone under, right? But yeah, so that level of Stoke, like, I really enjoy road tripping, like just driving with the dudes, hanging out. You do like a 12-hour drive with them. Like, you get to know people pretty fucking good. So that's my biggest thing as far as being outside doing stuff, is just hanging with your friends, doing stuff, chilling with the boys. So yeah, that's what brings me happiness.
And I think can you like, because like this year mountain biking was kind of my first thing, and like I hadn't done any downhill or anything, and I'd seen like my in-laws are from Rocky, so Baseline's like 30 minutes away, and everyone's talked like, when you get into mountain biking, people are like, oh, have you been to Baseline? Have you been it? So it's like kind of been in my thing. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go.
It's a prerequisite now.
Yeah, I'm like, kind of need to check this out. Everyone was like, it's so intense. I'm like, I have no idea what to expect or anything. It is super intense, but like the guys are super friendly. But like, even if if you don't have any friends who want to do the sport with you, I think sometimes just going out and putting yourself out there, people recognize if you're new or this, or sometimes, you get the alienation of like people who think like Jerry's don't belong or like newbies shouldn't be there. But for the most part,
those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are friendly, and like, so I came out to like, I talked to the guys because like, that's what I've found has really helped with Good Day, is like finding communities that I can assist with. Cause it's like, I'm not going to win one-on-one with Oakley or Smith. Like, yeah, our techs there, all this, but these guys have billion-dollar brands. So I'm like, how can I do stuff like that? I'm like, they were the first community I think I reached out to. I'm like, hey, could we give you like a group discount and raise some funds for you guys? And maybe we could make a limited edition product to like do that with. And they're like, oh, this is super sweet. So like I'd come out, but I'd never met them before. And then they're like, oh, you're on a hardtail. Cause like when I first started biking, I'm like, I don't know if I want to get a full suspension because bikes are expensive.
Oh yeah.
I'll just get a hardtail and see if I like it. And they're like, are you going to ride that hardtail here? I'm like, yeah, I think I can do it. So I think I did the blue run fine. And I like, I could do it. But then the guys were like, oh, I'm not going to do my next run here. Just take my second bike or, borrow my bike. And I'm like, I've never seen people be that friendly before who are like, here, try my bike. Or like saying, like when I was down in Calgary, cause I had my hardtail, the guys from Shred Collective, Graham and Dan, were like, here, borrow my second bike. I'll set it up for you. And you can come ride with us at Moose Mountain. I'm like, the friendliness of the bike community is like unheard of. I've seen so far.
Yeah. Anything on wheels is quite receptive, right? It's like, they're like, he's out here, he's trying, he did the initial investment and stuff like that. He's out there. Yeah. Might as well give it a shot. So, yeah. I like that kind of, and kind of going back to what you said there, just wanted to acknowledge it. Like for you to have a new business. I'm not sure if you reached out via phone or email or whatever like that, but just taking that initial step just to try and find some sort of community to get involved in from a total outsider perspective, being like, I want to insert myself on this culture. Like I like what these people are bringing to the table and I want to be involved in that. Like that in itself is very hard. Most people would never make that. They would never put themselves in a situation where there's criticism or someone could talk shit about them or whatever, right? Like, you know what? You might, like let's call a spade here. You're old, you're washed up, you're a little bit overweight. You're not gonna be doing World Cup events. Nobody fucking cares. You don't have, carbon fiber helmets and this and that and everything. Like jean shorts, skate shoes, and a full face is pretty much all you need, man. Like, get some shit secondhand, whatever you got to do just to get out there and have a bit of fun.
Yeah. And if it has duct tape on it or some zip ties, even better.
Yeah, absolutely. And like the motocross community is a lot like that to a certain point, right? Until these good guys start getting lots of money. But like if you're gonna bet, you see, some sort of like a triaxle Kenworth with like a 2-level trailer with bikes coming out of it and shit like that, and then you have a guy in a Ford Ranger with a truck tent. I'm putting my money on the guy at the Ford Ranger in a truck tent every single time, right? He's going to come here and put on an absolute clinic and show you how it's done, right? In the privateer class, right? That doesn't account for everybody. So, yeah.
Well, speaking of that, like, because I had the Baseline guys on for, I think, like episode 3, and they were talking about it because, like, when they tell people they're from Central Alberta and they're coming to ride like the double black diamonds in like Whistler or they're at like a bike park and they're going to ride the double black diamond. People are like, oh, well, we'll ride slow so you can keep up. And it's like, they're like 15 minutes in front of them, or like, right on their tail the whole time until they'll let them pass. It's like,
Yeah.
It's just funny how, like, same thing is like, people have that mentality. It's like, the big guy in that, whatever, he should, like, the little guy in his Ford Ranger can never compete. It's like, these guys are the ones busting their butts every day or ride it. Like, they've seen that track, or they, they're out in their, whatever they've built to practice on every day for the last 15 years trying to get it. Whereas like,
I say this all the time, man, is don't count out the flatlanders. They're fucking bored. It's cold. Like, check the mileage. They're doing it, right? Like, they might come from a hill that has only a T-bar or a handle toe or whatever, but they have been on their board from 9 a.m. till 5 o'clock at night. They've been standing the whole day. Like, their legs are tree chunks, man. They're not getting on a heated chairlift and fucking around. Like, yeah.
Well, look at the McMorris brothers. They came from Regina, Saskatchewan.
Perfect example. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and from kind of like my own my own situation, I guess. Like, I was a little bit older at this time, right? But this was when like the website sponsorme.com was out. So you get your big fucking video camera and you and your buddies would go shoot your spot, your handrail spot or whatever like that, and then you'd upload a real shitty quality video, and it was a 30-second thing, and you probably cropped in like Pennywise or Bad Religion or whatever kind of music you get off LimeWire that wasn't all scratchy and shitty. But then you just send out like mass emails, right, to whoever you could. You get bites, but you end up getting a couple things back, right? Like, a buddy of mine, a really good friend of mine, Daniel, he ended up getting like a monster hookup and pro deals from shops around town and all that kind of stuff, which was super cool to see a young guy like this. But I mean, coming from a small town, you don't really know where you stack up in the overall scheme of snowboarding and action sports and stuff like that. Because I remember another buddy of mine, Kevin Alessio, he's a couple years older than us. He's probably 4 or 5 years older than us. So me and Daniel at the time, we're in high school still, and Kevin calls us up and he says, hey, there's a snowboard contest at Winsport this season called the Air and Style, sponsored by Ripzone. So he needs a 3-man team. So he had 3 guys. They dropped out. So he's like, you guys are up. So we're like 14 years old, right? So our parents were like, oh, you're going to a snowboard contest, load up the truck, drive us. We stayed in like Motel Village, and there's like hookers and shit all over the place. We're like, what the fuck's going on? Like, this is wild. But same thing, like, our parents don't even really kind of know what's going on. They drop you off at the hill, right? You're standing there, and there's like, TJ Snyder and all those dudes and like Dennis Bannock, and you're just like, holy shit, like, this is real deal, right? So we ended up doing this contest, but I remember getting to COP, and that was like one of the first times I was there, and there was dudes wearing like only jeans, and it was like cold. They had no gloves on. Like, one guy had his fucking boots on the wrong feet. He was getting like a magazine part. I'm just like, look at these fucking hand jobs. Like, this looks ridiculous. Like, I don't like this at all. Like, and I just remember the shit talking. Like, this one guy, there was like 2 massive jumps in a row, and like my buddy, he was like a young guy, man. Like, he was so small that like he couldn't even make the jumps. Like, we literally took his jacket, wrapped it up so it wouldn't drag in the wind, made a snowball, and he was going down and doing double corks at like 15 years old. Like, we weren't even supposed to be in this contest yet. Like, we were supposed to be 18. Kevin just signed his like a waiver as our parents, like yada yada yada. So to see a community like that needs people being brought into it to pay for the infrastructure and all that kind of stuff like that. And then you have a community like mountain biking, which is usually seen as like the off-season sport that's not as crucial, not as much money is thrown at, but they're just taking everybody they can, right? So I always find that paradox a little bit funny and kind of hard to wrap my head around.
Well, I
bit
find
of a tangent there.
Yeah, I find it interesting because, like, skiing seems to shrink every year, and like they complain about like what COVID did for the ski hills. Like, there's groups called like the Western Canadian Ski Hill Association, and like all these groups that would meet and try to figure out how to bring more people out to the hills. And it's been around for like 15 years. Yeah. COVID has done what that group couldn't do in 15 years in 1 year.
Yeah, absolutely.
like they keep getting more and more expensive, where like biking, I'd like to think it's growing. I mean, like it's hard because like I call biking like the friendliest community you don't know exists. Like, because until you get into biking and you go to like these meetups or like, you know, all this stuff, it's like you don't realize how friendly and how welcoming that community is until you like jump into it. You're like, oh yeah, I think some people bike, and then you're like, holy crap, a lot of people bike and they're doing it all the time, but you don't realize it until later on.
Yeah, it's not something like you're not really seeing them, you know, it's not like a collective that's under the public eye by any means, right? There is a couple hoops you got to jump through a little bit, right? Like you got to find out, okay, like where are the trailheads, where are they going, like who, like what days they ride during the week and after hours and stuff like that, right? But yeah, you put in 5 minutes of research on like, you know, a Facebook group or something like that, like
you'll find a lot of groups. And I wonder if it's like, because like with snow sports and especially like Calgary and like with like, you know, it's an Olympic sport, you see it. Like I don't think I've never seen I don't think mountain biking, like I mean like X Games maybe.
I don't know, I'm not too sure.
But it's not.
I think they just kind of have like the mountain biking's just kind of paving the way for their own thing, right? They got like Rampage and Crankworks and all sorts of stuff like that, right? So they're probably just making enough money on those events alone. They're like, no, we don't need to mess with all this other shit. We're doing just fine.
Yeah, like Rampage hasn't. I don't know. Like I've only been biking for a year, so I have no idea how long it's been going on. But like I know Crankworks is a little older and been happening at Whistler and stuff like that. But like.
Yeah,
I think they're relatively new, or compared to some things in winter sports like Olympics. And well, I mean, slopestyle's new too. That just came in. Well, I mean, this dates you. Like, I don't really like the thing that's most wild is how fast time flies. Like, you're like, yeah, that happened last year, and you're like 8 years later when you actually look at it, you're like, oh yeah, that happened last year, 2018. Yeah, 2018 so last year, right?
Yeah, it's like, okay, Facebook, I don't need to remember that was 13 years ago. Yeah, that's funny.
You became friends with so and so 15 years ago. Oh God.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and like, you know, maybe we'll go back to like how you said, like reaching out to communities and stuff like that, of like being like scary. I don't know how I got into doing it. I think you just start once. Like how my experience started was when I did my second degree at Mount Royal University. I joined the ski club because like when I did my first degree of engineering, it's a quite depressing degree. Like, you know, you're always studying, you're in your dorms all the time doing like schoolwork. So yeah, it can get quite depressing. So I didn't have the social life. So then I'm like, oh, I'm just going to join the ski club and see how that goes and try to grow it. So we built it to be like either I say it's I could be wrong because maybe I didn't get the data on it or someone wasn't tracking properly, but we were 2,400 students in a campus size of 11,000. So the largest ski club potentially in the world, North America for sure. Like even at UBC, they're 800 people. U of A is 1,000. I think U of C was something around like a 2,000 mark, but like they never track their numbers. So it was just like word of mouth where we're like, yeah, here's our spreadsheet. Here's all the membership cards we sold. We're 2,400 members. Like it's not like it feels like we're 2,400 members. We're exactly 2,400 members. But like, yeah, you know, our university ski club was nothing. I don't think of anything special. Like it was just like you said, like, you know, how your communities of the ramp jams and like, you know, you building your stuff on 22 where like, oh, this is like a funny farm. And like, that's where the name comes from. It's like, you know, you just start bringing people together and like nothing crazy of anything, just want to have fun. And if you keep inviting more and more people, things just grow from there. So we started reaching out to other communities, or like, because we like our school didn't do anything for parties. Like UFC had BSD, like Bermuda Short Day, and MRU never had anything. So we're like, oh, we should start our own party. So we called it we wanted to call it, the university wouldn't let us do it. So they roadblocked us a little bit. So then we called it the MRU Patio Party. But MRU was an acronym and it stood for Most Ridiculous Unforgettable. So then we couldn't get in trouble for using the MRU name, but when anyone would see it, they would think Mount Royal University Patio Party, when in reality it was the Most Ridiculous Unforgettable Patio Party. So like we had pancake. It would start at like 12 in the afternoon, kind of like BSD, because that's what we wanted to grow. And like we'd have like free pancakes or like free hot dogs or this or that. But like what I started doing was reaching out to all the campus clubs, because like the ski club started to get more and more popular. I'm like, hey, science club, do you want to come be a part of this? Hey, geology club, hey, nursing club, like we were doing this party, we'll give you some wristbands to give to your students. We just want you to hype it up to your students and invite your friends. Do you want to come be a part of it? And it just made this collective bubble where like, yeah, we were 24% of the student body, but like we only got $10 a student, where our student unions would get like, I think like $300 a student every semester. And same thing with like athletics. And it's like, well, why do you guys get all the money when like we're the ones throwing all these parties? Like I remember when they had one party, what did they call it? Oh, U-Fest. And the guy was like, they spent, I think like $100,000 on this party. And they're like, we need to see the return on this. Otherwise we're not getting this money. And I said, well, if you gave $25,000 to ski club, I guarantee you would fill this every time. And he did not react well to that. But it's like, just let like grassroots will always win. Yeah, it might take some time, but like just being genuine and authentic and inviting other people along is how you build anything, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned that too, because I remember growing up that all of the funding for like terrain parks and all that kind of stuff like that, always there was very minimal support. So like I said, like the hill that I grew up on, like I started at, was owned by the MD of Bonnyville, but you're looking at a map top view down. It's much closer to Cold Lake. So there was always a big feud there that, whose tax dollars are paying for what and this and that and fucking around. But Cold Lake's also a huge hockey community. Okay. So they got like junior B team and all that kind of stuff like that. Right. And the oil field companies just like firing money at those guys, like arenas and gear and sponsorships and buses and fuel and all sorts of shit like that, right? And you're just like standing there, you're like, please sir, can I have some more? Like I just want some fucking chip-ins to get a fucking $1,000 rail like from our local welding shop, and they're just giving you the big one, like fucking beat it. So you're like, okay, well, got shut down in that aspect, so I guess I got to figure something else out. And there was a crew of guys, same thing, they're a couple years older than me, like Cole Vinnick and Brett Badeau and Jared Badeau and stuff like that. Those were kind of my like hometown heroes, right? Those are the guys that had like, the Burton dominant with the nice pink top sheet, and they were all kitted up, right? Like they were going to Lloyd or Edmonton or Calgary to buy their gear and stuff like that, right? But I remember these young dudes, like at the time, they were probably only like 15, 16 years old too, watching them. And they made our first couple snowboard rails. They took some like 2-inch square tubing. They made like a 6-foot flat, like a 45 down at a 6 foot long, and then another flat. And this thing come at you like nuclear, man. Like to try and board slide that thing, man. Like you had to sack up. Like you and your buddies were like, "Oh, here we go!" Like, here comes a broken collarbone. Let's make it happen. But seeing that type of grassroots thing where those guys were like, "Okay, we're not going to get the money. We need to come up with a solution. Let's build this thing." So to be an onlooker and seeing these guys making a difference, changing the way that the hill's going to operate and bringing something like that to because there was no other park before that. And these dudes made that happen. So I was like, at that point, I was like, oh, fuck, man. Like, I'm all in. Like, I grew up welding at my grandpa's shop and stuff like that, right? And at this time, like, I'd already got a job building, like, high-end hot rods, like, Model Ts, like these old Model Ts would roll in just a rust bucket, motor seized and shit like that. And then 2 years later, the thing would drive, a $150,000 car. So that grassroots stuff and dealing with financials and everything, a lot of people don't see that. The hill is just the thing that was there, and all these magical features just show up. They don't see the behind the scenes grind of making it happen.
You mean, I always thought moguls, like, they just roll them out in the winter and then they roll them back in the summer. And I assume that was the same for like rails. Like, you just planted a few like little rail seeds and then they would just sprout up, and that's how you got a terrain park. You're telling me that's not true?
Yeah. In my wildest dreams, yeah, that's just how it happens. If I could just put a rail everywhere, it'd be great. Yeah. It's so much easier, but
just sprinkle the side hit here and a little rail there, and just come back next year and it grows.
Yeah. An infinite budget over here, unlimited snowmaking budget. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's funny we're talking about grassroots and stuff like that. Have you ever seen the video, a vibe called Whitewater?
No.
So it was Nelson's video, and it was talking about like whitewater and how it started. So kind of, just like, you sprinkle it here and you hope it grows. But how they built they went in the summer and they're like, oh, this is probably going to be a great spot to come back in the winter and ski. So they built the lodge in the winter that year, and then they come back, they hike in and try to come back to it, and they're like, where's the lodge? It's supposed to be here. And yeah, it back then it snowed so much that it collapsed the lodge the first year. So it was just flat.
Yeah, like heartbreaking. Hey, like people worked for negative money to build something like that, right? Like yeah, that's wild.
Yeah, and like so like why they call it a vibe or whichever is like, they talk about, they're like, if you have duct tape on your, like the voiceover is like, if you have duct tape on your stuff, like you'll fit in better here. Like, we're only here to ride. Like, the population of Nelson's 10,000, 7,000 of them have season passes every year. Like that's
yeah, they're doing something right. They got
that. Who cares about, if it's the top, you got the next, I'll sit like Arc'teryx makes some sweet stuff, but like, you don't need the fanciest stuff. You just need to like, have a bit of fun and, have that like spirit of wanting to, just have a good day, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just keeping those. Yeah. And really honing in on like what aspect of the sport or your day-to-day life brings you the most joy, and just hone in on that, right? Like that's all you can really ask for. Like I'm probably gonna get shit on by this and stuff like that, whatever, but lap in the park, man, I don't care how much snow is out there. I just want to be in the park. Like I don't care about the big mountain stuff. I have like, riding powder is cool. Like it's awesome, but I have no ambition to go chase it and, be a purist or go skinning and shit like that. I'm like, man, I bust my ass off all the time. I can afford a lift ticket. I'm going to go up. And the amount of infrastructure and the people that busted their hump to produce these amazing features and stuff like that, like I could just stay here all day. Like a really good groomer first thing in the morning, like, that's where it's at. Like that's.
Yeah, I like after getting into, like, I always was like, I love powder. And then when I worked at Ski West during my second degree, I got to pick up a lot of skis for a good price or free, depending on if I hit the right sales incentives. So I have a ski basically for every day. So yeah, the front side skis on a groomer, like they just like, everything has a sacrifice. So it's like, if you have that ski made for those groomers, like nothing beats it. It just holds an edge and you can go so fast and feel so confident that a fresh groomer, the corduroy is a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. That's the best. Yeah. Especially when you can definitely tell, depending what resort you're at and the guys that have been in the cat, like you can really tell which operator knows what they're doing, right? Whether like there's certain spots, like you watch a corduroy, you can see, he was like reverse till with a bunch of down pressure. Like he was risking to throw a rock through the back window to make sure that corduroy was really good for you at the bottom of that big turn or whatever it was, right? Like, right. And they're trying to pull all that snow back up top for you or whatever they were doing. And like, time you'll see it and like they sneak a little side hit in for you and you're just like, oh yeah, that's a real one for sure.
Yeah, that's great. I never thought of that. Like you obviously, being in fabricating, and I've seen, you do some crazy welds on some snowcats and everything. How things get laid down and work a lot more than me.
Yeah, like when I first got exposed to, it's tricky. So, like, kind of the timeline. I start snowboarding. I do this kind of stuff. I see those guys I mentioned. I see them building rails, all this kind of stuff. They all grew up. They went to university and all that kind of shit like that. So I felt like I had this sense of like, I got to step up to the plate because I'm like with my buddies and stuff like that. We're putting on the miles. We're traveling. Like we were trying to be like instructors and coaches at the time, and we were putting the miles on coming out west, right? Like Red, Lake Louise, Sunshine, Kimberly, going out to Whistler, doing the Camp of Champions thing, all that kind of stuff, right? Trying to live your, pro snowboarder dream, if you want to call it that. But then like your day-to-day life, you're like, well, I'm at Kingster Ridge. So like, I know that the approaches to these rails and the angles and the construction methods aren't correct. So I felt this big sense of like, I got to do something about this and change this and make this so that if we have, a crew of guys that maybe turn into something or become the next local heroes or whatever, they're going to be set up for success when they go to competitions in other places. Let's try and bring this up to like the industry standard, I guess, if you want to call it that. So, yeah. But getting mixed in with the snowcat and stuff like that. So like basically the operation was I would just, build the rail. Like I say, like, I'm a kid at this point. I'm like 16 years old, 15, 16 years old. Like sometimes my parents had to drive this massive rail hanging off the end of our trailer and stuff and drop it off. And then Jürgen Grau and his wife Val, they're like, okay, well, let's try and make some sort of snowboard park program. And Jürgen's dad, he was a groomer at Rabbit Hill for a long time. And Jürgen's an absolute fucking G, man. Like this guy, like you want to talk about a guy that wears a lot of hats. Like he was, the plumber, the electrician, the salesman, the manager, the guy shoveling snow, the cat operator, the millwright, everything. Like he made that resort what it is, and he did a fantastic job. And he's also he's what I call a medium vibe guy. He never gets rocked. He's just always smooth. But I remember he took me for a ride, and I think they had a BR 250 at the time, so the old school like yellow thing, right? But they still had like 16-way hydraulics at the time and shit like that. And I just like remember him telling me, like, even at that time, this is an older machine, but he's just like, these things have enough power to just like rip themselves to shreds. So he really took the time, because I would always be like, fuck, man, like use the tracks and like make a quarter pipe and just like make it happen and like do some of this, do some of that. And he's just like, we can't pick up that rail, Kyle. It's too heavy for the cat. And I was just like, what do you mean this 36-inch triple extra heavy wall pipe that I stole from Esso is too heavy for the cat? It only weighs like 10,000 pounds. Like, just fucking grab it. Let's go. But he took the time to be like, hey, man, like chill out. And he'd show me like, this is how you got to do it. You got to process the snow. You got to come back. If you start turning around too much, you just make big fucking bomb holes and it turns to sugar and you can't do it. And he started telling me like, hey, like you're being an asshole right now. Like, you don't know that like we're sitting on top of like, 10, 15 feet of snow. Like there's a big valley here. So he's like, no, I can't just throw 200 grand at the terrain park for snowmaking budgets and stuff like that. He was just like, quit being an asshole, and we'll find this like common ground and we'll make it into something. So I got to work with him almost every day for like 4 or 5 years. And the guy was just an unreal good mentor in life and business and all of that kind of stuff. But it was more so like me on the outside of the cat the outside of the jump on top of a snow pile, like being such a hand job too, being like, come on, guiding him in. But it's like 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, he's got the blade in the air. He can't see me. And I'm just like giving him the stupidest hand signals. Like, no, man, like a little more fluff over here, a little bit of this. Right. And like the fact that he put up with that, I'm like, man, this guy's a fucking godsend. Like, but yeah, I really got to see what wear and tear can happen to a snowcat really relatively quick, right? If you're not paying attention. Like, they have a lot of horsepower, man. They're like 400 some horsepower. Just because they can use 2,800 RPM doesn't mean you have to use all of it, right? Like, you got to do your maintenance, you got to do your stuff, because that's coming out of your operational budget. A lot of resorts don't have the money to fix them. If they're like a small mom and pop thing, like kind of in your scenario, like Blackstrap or whatever, right? Like, somebody is really putting a lot of time and effort into those financials to make sure that they can afford that thing, right? Like, diesel's not cheap. Like, a lot of people don't realize, like, a small hill like that cat driver could be doing 300, 400 kilometers of just driving a night. Like, imagine getting in a snowcat and just going from Calgary to Edmonton.
Yeah.
Every night for how many months? Right?
That's wild.
Yeah, you really So I guess where I'm going with this, when I first seen that cat, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. And now with these new like tier 4, tier 5 cats coming out from train off and stuff like that, man, like it always takes me back to that time to be just like, man, this is a purpose built weapon. Like this thing is a Swiss Army knife. Like what you can do with this machine and a good guy on the controls is just fucking amazing. Like when it, and I'm not talking out my ass. Like I have like skimmed the surface. Like I've never been in the backcountry in a cat, nothing like that. But for this machine to be on like a 30-degree slope, drop the blade and just roll in piles up the hard pack is just phenomenal to me. And just like it does that day in and day out. So when guys are like, oh, this thing's a piece of shit or this thing's broken or whatever like that, it's like, well, I hate to be that guy, man, but it was probably you. You probably fucked it.
Like, 100%. Well,
yeah,
you know, you probably got to learn to appreciate the older ones a lot faster because, like, you know, being in a hot rod shop and seeing what you can make of something, like, you know, if you build something right, it can last forever.
totally, right? And it's just being hard on your equipment, like, and I've learned this too. Like my brother Cody and his company, Dirt Wizard, he's a contract park builder too. So he was just up north doing like the Alberta Winter Games. He does like skidoring events, all sorts of cool stuff like that too. But to really see him and look back at what he's doing with the machine and how he operates it, right? Like really simple things that you wouldn't think about, you know, just not turning on a dime in one spot, you know, take the time, do the nice 3-point turn, idle it down a little bit, let it warm up, do your pre-checks, right? Like all that kind of stuff. Because when that machine goes down, it can have an effect on the overall community. Like if you can't groom, you can't build your park, you can't build nothing. Like trying to fix that cat might put that hill at risk of like not opening next season, right? Like it's a thing. So I have a huge respect for those cats and getting to work on them now. Like train off, man, that I don't want to be a bag licker by any means or whatever, but I truly do cherish that working relationship that I have with those guys. That checks off all the boxes for me, man. They're right from the upper management to the guys on the floor. You know, you got like Al and Craig and Don Shaw and all the background guys. You got all the parts guys. You got the C&E contractor, Cody. You got Tyler Martin. All those guys just absolutely crushing it. Sledgehammer Industries, Sylvain, all those dudes. Just to see that company and the amount of effort and the dollars that are behind these machines, when you break it down, it's just a silly sport. Like all they're doing is just making snow smooth for shitty riders. That's all it does. And it's turned into this bajillion-dollar industry, right? But the way that Prinoth handles themselves and the management structure, and they just give us free reign, man. Like they have all these cool projects, custom stuff, mundane stuff, but they're just I truly appreciate those guys and what they've done. Like I strive to hope that Fun Farm and the new company Burnum can be managed as well as that and keep the crew morale high and just have fun with it. Like it is truly a blessing to go hang out there all the time and work on those machines. So.
Well, I think it's doable. I don't know how some companies go from, you know, the grassroots of being super cool and then they turn into like corporate shit show. But like I have mad respect for when a company goes from like, you know, cool thing and then becomes like third largest or top largest consumer packaged good brand ever. Like, are you familiar with Liquid Death?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like they signed an 82-year-old grandma drummer as their like spokeswoman or whatever, and it's like that to an accountant that never will make sense. But you know, to the brand of Liquid Death and like and you know, I don't see the behind the scenes. Like maybe behind the scenes it's like a corporate nightmare, but you know, from the outside they look like they're having fun. And
that like I've read a lot of books on marketing and all that kind of stuff like that, right? And I've never really known what was true, what wasn't true. But one thing that I do really believe is people know when you're genuine and when you're not. You need to stay on brand, keep doing what you're doing, and try and do something creative, right? Like with the other company, we just went through like a name change and a new logo and what like our what's that, our mission statement and all this kind of shit, and getting us on Google and Google AdWords and all this kind of shit like that. Like, it's just, there's a lot coming at you really quick, but you say that they're Liquid Death, they're just, going for it. Well, they must know that their customers want to see something a little bit different. So in my scenario where I'm dealing with this new website and stuff like that, these marketing people, they're just trying to copy and paste whatever they can get. Like, oh, here's an easy buck. Just copy and paste this, make them a logo, yada, yada, here you go. Send it out. So the guys that have really good success are the ones that are trying to break that mold a little bit, show their true colors. And it comes down to those original principles that I said. Like, it's got to have a beginning, a middle, and end, a good guy, a bad guy, educational, or funny. One of those three things. You start deviating from that, you're pretty much fucked. So,
I think a lot of people, they kind of get, that, like, they think they can't build it. Like, they're like, oh, if I do it this way, no one will buy it. Well, like, we all like to think sorry, my dogs are like, I want to be part of the podcast too. So but one's on top of the stairs and one's at my legs right now.
Let her rip. It's all good.
But I think a lot of people think, if I'm too unique or I'm too this, like, at the end of the day, like, the world's 8 billion people. I'm pretty sure if we grabbed everyone together, I would fit in 1% with everyone. There'd be a South American Jared and like a California Jared and like every place there's probably at least one person exactly like me.
Absolutely. And you're talking about Liquid Death and marketing and reaching out to your customers and stuff like that. Are you familiar with these guys on Instagram? The Boner Media?
No.
Do you know these guys? Oh, dude, that's the best fucking page on the internet, hands down. It's a young group of guys in Fernie, and I reached out to them a couple of days ago about building the rail and stuff, but Buddy just like shattered his ankle and stuff like that, so he's out. But he was like calling me in the hospital, like, well, let's try and get something going or whatever. But if you look at these guys up, man, like that's what people want to see, man. Like what they started doing is just absolutely fantastic, and I can't get enough of their page. They're like, we're gonna get to do one backflip for every follower we get, and this just snowballed out of fucking control. And so then they were just like, well, we got like 50,000 followers now, so we got to start doing more backflips. And they have a thing called Will It Triple, and Buddy on skis is just off like a normal wind lip, just on skis, hucking triples, and he just like full scorpions himself, lands on his head, and it pans out to him all wrecked, being like, it does not. Right, so that's the type of content that people want to see. Like, they don't care about your product. I shouldn't say they don't care about your product. They care about your product, but to get the clicks and the likes and stuff like that, that's the headspace you got to be at, and the services that you're providing for sure.
Yeah, well, and like, unfortunately, a lot of brands have the same similar technology. Yeah, it might be named different or this or that. Like, it's not like you can revolutionize a lot of things. So it is like the brand or the stuff that you give to your consumer.
Absolutely.
But like, sorry, ADHD, brain fart.
It's all good.
The joys of that. But yeah, like that. There's a guy, Bonk the Chonk on Instagram. And like, he literally just did the same thing. He had a ski mask and did stupid shit. And like, we followed him because it was, entertaining. But like, you can go the other way and be educational or, give some information. Like the TikTok algorithm, like, my God, does it know me way too well? Because it'd be like, oh, Jared wants to know things about brand building on TikTok today. So I'm on brand TikTok. And then it's like, on Wednesdays, apparently I want to see pimple popping on TikTok. So it'll like change everything. It's like,
yeah, and that fucking algorithm, man, you got to watch out for that thing. So I've been watching a lot of these videos posted by Boner Media, and there's just Viagra ads popping up and Cialis and all sorts of shit popping up on my feed now. So like, oh, what the fuck? Yeah. watching all the time.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
the one that I learned about marketing, so down in the States, they know people so well that Zellers would send out information to, like, they would send out pregnancy things, like not pregnancy things, but like welcome a new family thing. Cause they knew if they got a customer immediately when they had their kid to buy their stuff there, they would just be a customer for life kind of thing. So they'd send out the stuff that like would be like, oh, here's 20% off your formula and this and that. But what Zellers had did was they sent it to this family or like this house, and this dad calls and he's super upset. He's like, why are you sending my daughter this information on, new families and like discounts on baby food and all this stuff? And he didn't know, but Zellers knew that his daughter was pregnant before he did.
Oof. Oof. Yeah, not the call you want to be getting. Yeah.
No. Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of wild what we click through. But I mean, from the other, I think you have to be, cognizant of what you're getting sent and stuff like that. But I would rather have stuff sent to me that it's least interesting to me, rather than like, if they got no data, well, then I'd be getting advertisements for like 50-foot fridges. Like, here's your industrial fridge. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem that exciting. I'd at least like to see ski gear or something I'm searching.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing too, kind of on that thing, is it's like, in really, guys, go upstairs. The thing about information is it's like, there's kind of like 4 pillars. It's like the things that you're good at, the things you don't know that you're not good at, the things you. One sec.
It's all good, man. Do what you gotta do.
Yeah, sorry about that. But it's like, the things that you're good at, the things you don't know, or the things that you're not good at, the things you don't know that you're not good at. But then like 80% of all information in the world is in this category of the things you don't know, and the things you don't have any idea that exist. So it's like, I kind of like seeing new things once in a while, because it's like, cool, I had no idea. I might I like this stuff, and sure, maybe send me that ad. I might like that too.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, well, Jared, I got a note here beside me. So I did a little bit of research on podcasts and stuff like that. So basically we're at an hour and 7 minutes. Now is when we start losing people's interest and stuff like that. So I don't know if there is a market out there for people that care about the fabrication of snowboard rails, but should we use a bit of this time to kind of get into the number side of it and all that kind of stuff, and like give you my little spiel just in case this is the one and only time I get a chance to actually go for it?
Yeah, 100%. I think, I think an aspiring entrepreneur or someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, regardless if it's in like, fabricating cool stuff, or, they might go build, drywall or something with that. But I think kind of the steps and like, this and that. So like, shoot the time, give the information, like, let's let people it might not be for them, but they can take tidbits of this and then apply it to their thing. So go for it. Yeah.
This is definitely the part of the story in the podcast where we're going to focus on rusty, shitty snowboard rails being the bad guy and good fabrication practices being the good guy. Okay. So I did put down some notes and stuff like that, right? Because I really wanted to stay on track with this and let people know my view on how they've progressed or how they've degressed, all that kind of stuff. So the first couple snowboard rails that got built, right, there wasn't much infrastructure around it. They were something that was built with like really small tubing or whatever like that. Basically something that you and your friend, after a couple of beers in the shop, could just pick up, walk out to the hill and plunk it down. And that was kind of it, right? Like mild steel, all that kind of stuff. So you fast forward, a couple years, you get videos like Nixon Jib Fest and, guys that are like Camp of Champions, all sorts of stuff like that. Now it just turns into this bigger is better, like these huge on hill stair sets, wall rides, pole jams, all sorts of cool stuff, right? So that was the progression with that. Like, let's just make it bigger, which okay, how do we move this shit around? It's flimsy, it's hard to store, right? It looks good for a little bit, but then it gets beat up by the elements, all that kind of stuff. So a couple companies try and make these things legit, and they somewhat manufacture them, but they took it like 70% of the way, and that it's just been chilling there for like 20 years. Okay. And with these snowboard rails, and if you start cross-referencing it, I don't want to be the safety douche by any means, right? But like OHS states, you're not allowed to lift more than 50 pounds per person. Okay. So the solution for this, all these huge rails that we're building, right? They're right from 6-inch pipe to 8, 12, 16, 32-inch lube tubes, all that kind of stuff like that. So at the most part, the average person can't pick those up anyways, right? Like, two people can't pick them up and move them around. And the infrastructure for the snowcat operators, like, they've cut fork holes and all sorts of shit like that, but they've just, it's been a really hacked together system of snowboard rail management. Okay. And the resources that have been used to fabricate these things and stuff like that. So I got it in my notes here, and this is kind of my new mission statement with Fun Farm, is don't haul scrap metal to your resort anymore. Okay. That's the deal. That's what really pisses me off. Like, there's nothing worse than going to a resort, you get on the chairlift, you're up the hill, and there's this beautiful ridge line on one side, and you look over at the operations building, and there's just this heaping pile of rusty, shitty old rails just blown out and ran over by the cat, and they've just been left in the bush just to rot for the next 50 years, right? So, and this has been a problem that I've struggled with for like a long time. We're talking like starting doing this in like 2004, right? But I'm trying to change the way that resorts and mom and pop hills look at snowboard rails. So snowboard rails have always been a draw on the bank account, right? So basically the worst case scenario for a smaller hill, and I always refer to a smaller hill because that's what I have, what most hands-on experience with, right? Mm-hmm. Is that these smaller hills, they have a really small operational budget and all that kind of stuff like that. But then you're going to go to them, you're going to fundraise, you're going to do whatever, and they're going to take X amount of dollars out of that budget to get something. And I have a story that like really hits home. So when I became a snowboard coach for a couple of years, right? Like, we did the Cassie certificate and all that kind of stuff like that. So we get like a freestyle team put together, and I started a crew of young riders, all volunteers. We call ourselves the Goon Spoon crew, right? So we had like basketball jerseys and shit that we wore. Like, I got one hanging up on my wall. It was fucking, it's such a good time. But I had to, these are like a band of kids. Like, we're all like-minded kids. We had to go in front of town council, and we had to do our thing and stand there like a bunch of jackasses and be like, we're so-and-so Goon Spoon crew, we want X amount of dollars for snowboard rails. This is what we're going to do. And we hustled all the branding, all of that kind of stuff. Like, okay, this is going to work. So we ended up getting like, I think it was like $16,000 or something like that. So we ended up placing an order with another, like at that time, like a professional snowboard rail manufacturer. Okay. So Cold Lake is it's on the end of Highway 20. It's the middle of fucking nowhere. Like, you can't drive through it. If you're going there, you're just going there to go to Cold Lake. You're going there to work or whatever. So, a month or two goes by, all our rails show up. They come down the hill on this big highway tractor, and we're all standing there, all stoked, right? Like, this is gonna be the best. Like, all the hard work paid off. Like, we're gonna have this real professional looking hill. And the truck wasn't tarped in, for one. Like, the rails weren't like saran wrapped. They weren't nothing. And a lot of these rails, they didn't even make it through transport, man. A lot of the legs were broken off them, and they're falling over. And you can tell where like the trucker was just like had ratchet straps on it. Like, he was doing his best to hold it together, but it was just an overall design of these things that was just like way too light, way too underbuilt. Like, welds are shitty, like, painted with just trim clad or whatever. So at that point, I was like, I looked over and that rail that these young guys from the hill that they built, I'm like, they're ahead of their fucking time right now. Like they already got fork holes, it's thicker material, it's painted nice. Like this is a nice looking rail. The angles are trash, but it's pretty good, right? So that's when it really kicked off to be like, okay, I can make a difference in this. And like my absolute nemesis out of all of this is plywood on snowboard rails. Man, I cannot stand plywood on snowboard rails. So a couple years ago, I go on this huge tangent and I reach out to everybody that I can. I call all the resorts and I'm like, hey, what is it costing you to buy these rails and maintain them every year? And like right away, I either get sent to like, you know, the AP department or like the bean counters or whatever. And then a couple of weeks goes by and they get back to me and they're like, so each year it costs us, you know, $850 to refurbish our entire fleet of rails. And at this time, I had already owned like my own welding shop for quite a while. We were doing service rig maintenance, drilling rig maintenance, like 4 trucks going full time, like nice shop, all this shit. Giving her, and I'm like, there's no fucking way that's how much this costs you. So I really start like digging into this, and I start breaking down these numbers and figuring out like, okay, like we got to factor in like one, you got to get this thing in the snow, and then at the end of the year, you got to dig it out with the cat without breaking it. For one, they're just like these flimsy little things. Like we talked about before, these cats got 400 some horsepower. Like one little, you know, if you sneeze and jam the joystick, like you're fucking nuking that thing. You're taking it right out, right? And it's no fault of the cat operator. That's just the
Flimsy
cards
rail.
that they've been handed, if you want to call it that. So I start looking into these numbers and stuff like that, and I find out that basically what was happening is there was a crew of 4 or 5 guys that show up the hill, you know, October, November. They get a company credit card, they get given a company truck, and they go to town, they go to Totem or Rona or whatever it is. They're buying plywood at like the highest market value that you can buy it. They're buying trim clad off the shelf for, you know, $100 or whatever, and they're buying like a 1/4 inch bolt by one is like $2.50 a nut and all this kind of stuff. And they're trying to figure out with welding rods and do all the repairs and repaint this stuff like that. So like they were just spending like a ridiculous amount of money on these things and getting nowhere. So I'm like, okay, let's change this. We're going to up all of the material sizes. We're going to go to like industry standard. Because one thing that just used to drive me mental too is like, okay, you're walking up to this nice resort. The handrails and the stair sets walking up to the resort are held to a better manufacturing standard and governed way more than a rail that you're putting on the hill for people to ride on. That there might be 20,000 people that hit that thing in a season, and it's just falling apart, and they're just like, oh, whatever. She's like, no, not whatever. That's not good.
You mean that sharp pointy jab because it broke off at someone is not a safe thing?
Man, yeah. And it just kills me. Like another one is with these rails, like puckboard with countersunk screws into the top. Like just run that through your head for a little bit. You know, if you're snowboarding or skiing or whatever you're doing, right, and you're like sliding across a rail and there's this inverted triangle shape of solid steel popping out, even if it's, you know, 1/8 of an inch, when you clip that, your board is going into the plastic, like into the rail. It's stopping you completely dead. Like you're fucked. You're not riding it out, and you're gonna fall backwards on another one. You're gonna wreck your brand new, you know, Arc'teryx jacket or your AK jacket, whatever you got. So already I don't like that. But so I'm like, hey, we need to fix all of this stuff. But like where it really needs to start, and the first thing we need to do, our first call to action is we need to make these things easier on the snowcat guys. Because, you know, you mentioned you had oil field experience. I'm not sure if you have any, you know, equipment experience or nothing like that. Like just even on flat level ground where the elements, everything is in your favor, just try and pick up a piece of pipe or something flimsy or something that has a big radius on top or whatever without dropping it on the cab or whatever. And then if you put yourself in the mentality of a snowboard rail, okay, right from when the thing shows up on the trailer, everything about material handling and shipping it and dealing with that rail, it has to be unloaded from a trailer. Okay, it has to go into a shop door, which all lengths of steel are 20 feet wide. Shop doors are only 16 feet wide for one, so you got to weasel the fucking thing in there, get it onto your saw. You got to cut it, you got to build it, you got to have a long enough shop to do all this kind of stuff, right? You want to lay it out, do a nice job. You got to pick it up, you got to paint it. So you got to move this thing like 3 or 4 or 5 times before it's really finished. And there's always an exception to the rule, right? Smaller rails and shit like that, right? You don't have to move as much. You just pick them up, move them around. But I'm like, okay, what do we do to make these things easier on these CAT operators? Because I made a post not that long ago. Like, one, they're by themselves. Usually, it's cold, it's dark, you can't see anything. Like a snowcat has really good visibility, but where do you hook up a rail on a snowcat? Right in front of the fucking blade, so you can't see anything. You can't see the forks you're using. You can't see the legs on it. You can't see anything. And then you build these rails and that technology hasn't changed, and they use, like, what's a standard rail? Like, let's use like a 16-foot flat box, for instance. Okay, so it's 16 feet long. The 16 foot is driven by, you can buy all your material, comes in like 21-foot lengths, okay, for pipe and stuff like that. So that's a good number. It all breaks down, and you buy your square tubing, whatever you got to do. But like most of the manufacturers and stuff like that, they're using like, an inch and a half square tubing with like 100 wall, like 1/8 maybe, and stuff like that. And it comes down, it goes into the snow, and then it's buried. Like, just go take a metal rod, like a 1/2 inch metal rod, and throw it in your front yard and let it snow on it all year. Try and pull that out, right? Like, just try and get that rod out without bending it or breaking it or anything. So what the resorts have done, because they're like, okay, this thing's jammed in. Now this snowcat's going to completely fucking demolish this thing every time we go close to it, because we're trying to dig out a big chunk of ice, right? So there's guys that have tried to use tiger torches and chainsaws and all sorts of shit, and you're just opening yourself up to just like a world of headache.
And warping and everything.
Oh yeah, it's just insane. It's way underbuilt for what it needs to do. And most of the time, if you don't get the welds and stuff sealed up, water is going to get in there regardless, and it's going to freeze and expand and break the tubing. It's just going to make a fucking mess of the thing, right? So then that's already a no-go. So now everyone's mad. The accountants are mad because they wasted money on it. It looks like shit on the hill. They got to call in another guy to come fix it on site, or their guys are going to try and do it, make a mess of it, whatever, right? So, okay, all that's good. So now let's try and we're faced with an issue of, let's upsize the materials and make this thing strong enough. Like my new goal is that we're going to make these rails so the CAT operators can dig them out with the CAT by themselves. Okay, like our rails next year, you're going to be able to come up from one side with the CAT, grab it, and just yard it out. Like, and then how I got to that conclusion, and people are going to be like, well, it's hard on the CAT or whatever, but use your fucking head. Like, chip off the snow that you can, right? Make yourself a pile downhill, so when you lift it up, it doesn't take off on the hill on you, stuff like that, right? Like, we're trying to help you out here. Like, we have your best interest at heart. Like, don't shit on someone that's trying to improve something, right? So, but then it becomes more expensive, right? Like, you've tripled the wall thicknesses, you've taken the legs from being square tubing to a circle tubing because it's cheaper, all that kind of stuff. So then we get into the deal of, okay, let's make these things out of stainless steel, right? And everyone, as soon as you hear stainless steel, it's some sort of like magical thing. Like, it's just like, oh, we can't have that, or it's going to be too expensive, or whatever like that. And the terrain park and ski hill industry is like an old dog. You can't teach it new tricks at all. It doesn't matter what type of presentation you do, how well you present those numbers, you show them the long run, you give them samples, whatever. And I always say the worst thing about dealing with snowboarders is dealing with snowboarders, okay? Because there's such a huge turnover rate. They're ADD, they're kind of focused on the job, they're kind of not. There's usually a couple that make it to like a management position, and then they get to like 35 and they're like, it turns out there is actually no money in this. So unless I want to make some of myself, I got to get like a different job or keep climbing up the ladder a little bit, right? So then it's really hard to make those long lasting business connections with them. But we're slowly breaking into that stainless steel market, and I prepared a few numbers and stuff for you. So I am going to read it right off my sheet because I want to get this out there into the open and stuff with that, right? So here's page one, and I tried to write this from like a hypothetical situation, but give the most accurate numbers that I can. Okay, so usually what happens is that they'll give you a call. They don't want to plan ahead. Usually they never do plan ahead. They always wait till like October, and they're like, well, we need it like November. We got, opening weekend or whatever. We want to do rails and shit like that. So you're like, okay, well, we could have started this like 2 months ago, but anyways, we'll keep cruising with it. Like, yeah, whatever. So doing our thing. So when you call it, so say, let's use, like I said before, a 16-foot long T box that's a foot wide, 24 inches tall with the cladding, and then you got like a 1 foot leg on it, 1.5 inch square tubing for the vertical legs, and then 1.5 inch skid 40 pipe, like you've seen a million times. You got the 90s on them and stuff like that, right? So if you kind of break it down, your welding wire and all that kind of stuff like that, your consumables are relatively cheap. Your plywood, you're going to be, probably, depending, you need one full sheet, so you're going to be $60-$70 kind of depending where you're buying it. The top sheet that we use on our rails, we don't use puckboard anymore. Like, get rid of that. That's garbage. That's old school technology. It doesn't work. It doesn't perform. So we've gone to a 3/4 inch butcher block top sheet. Okay, and what that means,
Cool.
it's the same stuff that they use in industrial kitchens. So
Yeah.
if you ever hung out with like a ski racer or a downhill guy or stuff like that, basically how a ski and snowboard go down the hill and glide. You jump on the snow, creates heat. There's a thin layer of water between you and the snow, and then boom, you're going down the hill. Okay, that's the short of it. So what happens when you have a rail and you use a box that has plastic on top? When you take that board that's waxed and you just jump on it, okay, that same thing is happening. There still needs to be that thin layer of water in between the board and your rail, and then you're going to slide along. But what happens is it gets all scratched up and this and that. But when you first jump on it after a while, say, especially when it's a little bit warmer out, like you've all seen it, right? Like late season riding, you go in a box at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you stick and you just go ass over tea kettle, right? Yeah, just like poof, and you see it's all warped and the screws are sticking on, all that kind of shit like that, right? But our top sheet is textured on top, like it's very rough. Okay, and what that allows it to do is create that air gap in there, that so it mimics that what should be a layer of water in there, so you can just slide over it. So a great feature of our rails is you can use them all year round. You can use them in the summer, like Windsport's using them for their like summer training park. They don't rust, right? Like you can leave them overnight, spray them with water, do whatever you want, come back the next day and they slide perfect. Okay, so
That's
same
sweet.
thing. ADHD brain going a bit of a tangent here, so we'll come back to this rail. But you got to get the mild steel. Everything dealing with mild steel and stainless is basically exactly the same. You just change the wire, the gas. You use a brand new set of stainless consumables. That's it. As far as fabrication goes, that's really the only thing that changes. And you just try not to contaminate it with other stuff in the shop. Okay, like this isn't like a pressure vessel or medical grade or nothing like that, right? Like it's just very simple, easy to work with. It's a little bit heavier too, which is nice. So you build this rail, you get it all done. That rail is probably like 10 hours labor, which is at $120 an hour or whatever it is that people are charging, right? And people are gonna be like, oh, $120, it's a lot of money. It's not. That's a pretty good rate for a welding shop and stuff. So you do that, but now where the issue comes in, you got to cut this plywood, right? So the normal procedure is if you have a table saw or a track saw or a skill saw, you got to lay it out, paint the edges, put it up on the rail, drill the holes, all that kind of shit like that, right? Which is super time consuming, right? Like you can go ahead and pre-paint the boards if you want, all that kind of stuff. But as soon as you cut it and you don't treat that raw cut edge again, that plywood's just going to rot. It's just going to disintegrate, right? Depending which way you place the grade and stuff like that too, it's just going to blow apart and look like shit.
Yeah.
So that little chintzy 1/2 inch plywood going up against a 30,000 pound winch cat at 400 horsepower at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the cat driver has an oopsie, it's gone. Like there's no saving it. Even if you have like a
Yeah.
skier that has a wreck on it or a snowboard or whatever, you run up beside it, whatever you can do, like you will smash through it. And everyone's like, well, it's easy to replace. Okay, that's fine. I'll give you that argument. But so that rail, like our cost on it without branding too. Like here's another thing. The train park guys always want to sell the branding. Like, you own a company, you're self-employed, you're doing your deal. Are you going to be happy with like rough painted plywood with like a green smiley face like stenciled onto it? It looks like, like a 4-year-old like finger painted it on. Like, that's not a good representation of your business at all.
Not
And
especially
then,
when you're paying $140 for a lift ticket now.
oh, exactly, right? Like that, it's got to do something for you, right? So that's what I mean. It's got to be educational or whatever it is. It's got to be appealing. They have to be proud of it.
Yeah.
So okay, so now you got to make a stencil. People are gonna be like, "Well, you can make a cardboard stencil or whatever. It's gonna look like shit." If you want to get a chloroplast stencil made and get it cut out, it's $300, right? We did it for Toyota and all sorts of stuff like that. But then you got to sit there and you have to wait for that plywood has to dry. So you're tying up the shop, you're fucking around, you're trying to move things and get it assembled, get it out there, and you don't want to get it dirty in transports. You got to saran wrap the whole thing or get it shipped on a big trailer, whatever you want to do. Okay. So then that brings us back to, how do we solve those issues? One, it's underbuilt, it's falling apart, it's a bad investment, it looks like shit. We got to fix that. So, okay, we're going to teach these guys, this is the way to do it. Stainless, we're going to overbuild it, aluminum cladding, vinyl printed graphics, stainless hardware, and just make it strong enough so the cat operators, like, if they can just push it and just run into it and be rough on it, make the rail strong enough, man. Just give them like a wear bar on the front. Like, if you're gonna smash it here. Like, go to your blue in the face. I don't care what you do with it, but just leave the riding surface and the graphic alone. Okay. So
Yeah.
our rail, if you compare it to a stainless rail, the same rail with the box and all that kind of stuff, and like our rails too, we don't have any hardware from the top. All our stuff is screwed from the underside, so there's no hardware on top at all.
Yeah.
It's totally seamless. Like, it looks slick as snot, right?
Yeah.
So with all like our good features and all that kind of stuff like that, if you do a cost comparison between a mild steel snowboard rail with branding and then you do a stainless rail of much better quality, the mild steel one comes out to like basically $2,300 is what I got. $23.99.63 is what I quote those out at. Okay.
Yeah.
And then a stainless one comes out to $25.07.32. Okay, well, people are gonna be like, well, it's more money. If we're gonna do a big bulk order of rails, it's not worth it. Okay, whenever. Fuck yeah. You don't want to do a good business, you do that. You want to keep doing the way you're doing it, let it rock. There's a reason you came to me for this problem. I'm trying to help you out. You got to drink my Kool-Aid for a little bit, and you got to trust in what I'm saying. So where it really comes down to it is the longevity of these rails. So the reality of it, and I have it broken down here. So that mild steel snowboard rail that costs you, $2,399.63. By the time you pay, and I went very conservative on this, okay? Like, we're talking low numbers. Say you got a 4-man crew at $15 an hour, and you give them that credit card, and they go to the hardware store, and they're paying for all of that. And I only factored in paint and plywood, okay? I didn't factor in, like, new 2-foot squares and a skill saw blade and Slurpees and a pack of cigarettes that they part on the same tab or whatever, right? And the time to go get it and shit like that, right? So, but basically, each rail, if you were to put new plywood on it every year and repaint it start to finish, is an annual cost of $685. Okay. I mean, like I said before, that doesn't include moving it down the hill or storing it or anything like that. Okay. That's just that cost. So, and a stainless rail, I have one beside my shop that I like rent out all the time or whatever. And we bring it back and we clean it up. And all you really have to do with it is just take some red Scotch-Brite and buff the top, because it gets us some contaminants from people riding mild steel rails. Okay.
Yeah.
Some of that contaminants ends up on this other rail. So then you basically just use, WD-40 if you want, red Scotch-Brite, wipe it off, and it's done.
Yeah.
Like the edges on your snowboard are stainless steel. So why are you building the rails out of mild steel? Like match those two components. Okay. So the maintenance on those other rails, and this was another thing. Like I went high on my estimate here. If you bought a brand new stainless wire brush for your grinder, that's $35, right? You bought the whole bin of, or roll of red Scotch-Brite and stuff like that, right? That's another, $15-20. But each year, and unless there's some sort of damage to it from the snowcat, that's running you $55 a year in maintenance fees. That's it. That's all it costs you. So your original purchase was $200 more, but over the four years, it's cost you $220 in maintenance. That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
And that
Versus
rail is it's still worth something, and it looks good.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, it's not deteriorating, it's not falling apart, it's nothing. Like I said, unless there's cat damage to it, then it is what it is. But when you break it down to the mild steel rail, you bought the thing for $2,400. You got your $685 a year. So you do that over five or four extra seasons from the year you bought the rail. That's $2,700, man. It just costs just to upkeep that thing and maintenance and stuff like that. So like if you're a terrain park manager, like that's another rail per season. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, it's just like, hey, I after 5 years, these things are paid for. So I can just buy a new rail and like the savings that I have on it. And then another great thing about this kind of stuff, and like this ties back into what I was saying about hauling these scrap metal features out to the bush, and you're wrecking this, area of outstanding beauty. Like nobody wants to see that shit. Is we've tried to come up with a program. So like we got a big giant 40-foot trailer, right? And we got a new Dodge 5500 with a big picker on it. This thing will pick up 7,800 pounds at 55 feet. It's a big truck. So we want to start hauling all these rails that are broken and bringing them back. Like we're going to haul them away from you and just take them to the scrapyard. Okay. But so if you're dealing with a mild steel rail, okay, the price by weight for that scrap metal on mild steel is like 8 cents a pound. Okay. So that rail is really only worth like $3.90. Okay. Which is garbage. Like that's nothing. So if you have that same rail in mild steel or stainless, and we come back to you and you're like, oh, we ran it over the cat or whatever it is, like we'll buy that thing back from you because I can infinitely turn that into whatever I want, and it's still worth something at the scrap dealer. Like I think for right now, like the scrap is like 46 cents a pound. So that rail, if it's 130 pounds, is still worth $60, and it just never breaks down, that's a good business, right? So even if I don't buy these rails back from you or whatever, if you end up with a pile of stainless steel scrap metal 20 years down the road and you call someone to haul it in, that's a big chunk of cash there, right? If you time it right. So yeah.
Well,
and it looks nice.
Well, another thing, like, they're doing all these repairs and whatnot. The other thing too, if they're not doing repairs on your stuff and like all they have to do is Scotch-Brite it, you have 4 employees now who can go do stuff faster or go do stuff otherwise. You can go utilize your labor force a heck of a lot better than spray painting some plywood every year and putting a logo back on it.
I could not agree more, man. And that's another thing we tried to do. We got away from plywood, right? So, and people try to talk us out of it. Like we use 3/16 thick aluminum sheets, like plasma cut. Like we just throw it on the table, it cuts the sheet, it's already prepped, good to go, it's got the holes, you just put it in the rail and done. And you can put a gorgeous graphic on that thing. And so the what it costs you to paint plywood and try and put a shitty stencil on it and stuff like that is just ridiculous. Where you can get, like, we have a wicked vendor here in town, like that print-off rail that we just did is 50 feet long. Okay, so that's 50 feet worth of advertising, 2 feet tall, double-sided, for $1,300. And it will last a lifetime. And you know what? If a cat driver does smash into those panels or whatever, just smash it back. Just
Yeah.
whatever you got. You got a hammer, whatever you got, just beat the piss out of the thing till it goes
Yeah.
back to where it's supposed to be, and that's it. It's good.
Yeah.
You can fix that. That aluminum sheet was only what, like $85? Like, it's not much more than plywood, and it doesn't break down. Just smash it back with a rock or whatever you got kicking around.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
100%.
Let's kind of like dumb this down a little bit here. So yeah, that's my little spiel. So thanks for putting up with that. Wanted to get that off my chest, but yeah,
it's no
that's
different. Like, cause like it's no different than like when you go to a liquor store, right? You know, there'd be places that would have all-in pricing, and it would actually be cheaper. Like, cause like that's was my background. It was beer sales, and I'd see it all the time. And you could go to a place and it would be all-in pricing and be like $25, but then there's another place that has plus pricing. So on the shelf, it says $19.99, and you're like, oh, it's cheaper here. But then you're like, oh, didn't factor in the tax, didn't factor in the deposit. And now you're paying $26 actually when you leave the store instead of the $25. But you think the other store saying it's $19 on the shelf is cheaper. It's like sometimes
absolutely.
Maybe we need to go back and have people do grade 2 math where we're doing addition and subtraction, so you can like learn that better. So when they go into a rail park and they become the accounts payable at the ski hill, they can be like, oh, if I pay $600 every year and I do that for 4 years, or I buy Scotch-Brite for $50 for 4 years, this one's the cheaper one. Okay. So yeah, grade 2 math, we need to get better. Maybe we can talk to Danielle Smith about it, because you know we're going to do a whole. Apparently, we're doing new schooling, so that's a whole thing. But as we come to the end of the podcast, there's kind of 3 questions that I have left.
Let's go.
You know, being an entrepreneur, would you say the first feature you ever built, as Fun Farm or whichever, was embarrassing now, like from your standards today versus back then? Is your first feature embarrassing to you?
No, absolutely not. No, it's definitely not.
Really?
Well, because let's put it this way. I'm a product of child labor. Okay. Like, there's like Kodak film pictures of me with like my grandpa and my dad and welding and been in the shop and all that kind of stuff like that. So by the time I was given the opportunity to make a snowboard rail, I'm basing this off of something that I delivered to the general public. Okay. No, it was built to satisfaction. Like, I quite enjoyed the feature. Like, it could have used a few more things. Like actually, one of the first couple of rails that we built, talking about not having enough money and a budget and stuff like that too. And like, I always had a group of really talented men and mentors in my corner. Okay. And it started, like I mentioned, like my grandpa and my dad and stuff like that too. But there was other guys that were super influential in me becoming a fabricator and a welder and stuff like that. Like, there was a really good family friend of ours, Blaine McMillan. He was a rig welder through and through. Like, this guy, you think Alberta rig welder, this is the dude. He's been on all the big pipeline jobs. He was the guy. And he had the big beanie like this all the time, and he'd come in, but he could walk the walk and talk the talk at the same time. And he never had to help me out by any means, but my dad made a call to him and said, hey, can you teach Kyle how to run a welding rig? He's going to Skills Canada in a couple weeks, right? And you're just a young kid, you're like grade 9 or whatever. And he'd come over and show me how to run stick and stuff like that, teach you how to have the swag and how to talk. And he was one of the first adults that let me say the F-bomb around him and shit like that, right? Like, so he kind of taught you how to be a man. And he has a saying, and I absolutely love this story. So the Cold Lake motocross track, okay, they got a bunch of money. There was a guy named Dan Cookson. So Dan Cookson is really good at the books. Okay. So he gets a bunch of really good government grants and all that kind of stuff like that. Right. He got like $1 million or something for the town. And then the town leased him the land and they built this awesome track. And it's just super cool. All new equipment. And basically the last piece of the puzzle for the motocross track was to put in the 42 person start gate. Okay. And same, the oil field companies, they donated it. So Cold Lake has one of the nicest start gates out there. It's all concrete. It's got a shack around it. So when you drop the gate, those big 450s aren't whipping rocks at you from the sit and shit like that. But what happens is there's mechanism. So these two super long pipes with all these little things on it, right? All these big heavy gates, and there's a bar, and you use this bar and you pry it up on this big ratchet system, and it locks in place. And then the guy on the running the flag counts you down. When the gate drops, you step on this pedal, and then the gate drops, and the races happen. Okay,
Yeah.
but when this gate showed up, these two pieces of pipe, the bolt holes weren't lining up. So when you put this bar in there and you stand it up, some of the gates were at different angles. Okay, so it looked all fucking stupid. And motocross guys, those gates got to be perfect because it might be an advantage if it drops 1 second quicker or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So there's all these smart guys, like including my dad and all these guys, these big hot shots from Imperial Oil and all this kind of stuff like that. And Blaine's sitting there, and you could tell he just come off a big job. His shirt's all ripped up, and he's got his collar popped, and the same thing, the beanie's on the side, and he's leaning on the end gate of his welding truck, right, like a super nice Dodge lift kit and all that kind of stuff. And he's waiting. And these fucking shitheads are there trying to figure out how they're going to fix this gate. And they're talking about machining parts and all this high-tech stuff. And we weren't going to be ready for the weekend and all that kind of shit. I just remember Blaine taking his beer, putting his beanie to the back, putting his lid on, starting his welder, grabbing his cables, and he just gets in there and he just gouges off this bolt, right? And he welds the thing together, like doesn't ask permission for nobody, and he eyeballs it, and he's got it dead dick straight, right? And all these guys are like, "Whoa, what are you doing that for?" Whatever. He goes, "Because I'm a fucking welder, that's why." And that was it. And that gate has not been touched. It has been perfect ever since. So guys like Blaine and stuff like that, I'm so grateful to have those guys in my corner. And snowboard rails and ramps and all that kind of stuff, right? Like we do a lot of sled ramps. We do a lot of we did a real big setup for Sam King ride the Vibe, right? So he's usually good for a couple $1,000 a summer and stuff like that, and cool ramps and weird shit he wants to build. But even ramps were always something that people kind of navigated towards and pushed me towards. Like my buddy, when we were in high school, same thing, watching Krusty videos and all that kind of stuff. They really were like, man, we got to build a ramp. Like we got no money, but we want to build a ramp. So we got a margarine jar and we duct taped it shut, cut a hole in it, and we put on it Kyle and Daniel's ramp fund. Okay. And we had this little company at the time called Shred the Gnar, SG. And we made t-shirts and shop class and all that kind of shit like that. But we're not going to open this thing up until it's overflowing. And within a couple of days, man, we had the whole high school was in on this. Like teachers were giving us money and shit like that. Like we had enough money to build this rail. So we built it in shop class and took it out and everyone's watching. It's just a super cool time. And another guy that was just really influential for me was my high school shop teacher, Mr. Onger. This guy grew up in Canmore, and he was a woodworker through and through. He would just do these amazing things on the lathe, like a square bowl on the lathe, which when you don't know what you're looking at, you're like, how did you do that? It's square, it should be round, and all this kind of cool stuff. But he was my fucking hype man, dude. He's passed away now, but he would always just be like, you know what, you should keep doing this. And he would let me whatever I could drag into the high school shop class. He would let me form the tubes. I was charging people the Kinnison Ridge, good money using the high school shop and their equipment. He would let me come in on the weekends. But he knew he wasn't a welder at all. So he made a deal with me. He was like, okay, we'll let you do all this, but you have to teach the kids in the class how to weld and do it properly, right? So, and he took me to welding competitions, and we go hang out, and he'd be just I was driving somewhere and I seen this chain link fence compound with a bunch of rusty material in there. He's like, well, I did some more rooting around and I found out that this person owns it and they're gonna donate this to you. So he would grab his trailer and help me grab all this material and stuff. Just a complete G. So I really have to, I'm not sure if pay appreciation to those guys that push me into that and to make it happen. And another guy that I kind of want to have a mention to was my high school math teacher. Okay. I was not a student, man. I wanted to go ride bikes and do anything but that. There were so many times I'd be in school and I'd be like, man, the guys at work, they're putting that new motor in the car. Fuck it, I'm out. I just leave. I just go to work for the afternoon and stuff like that and help them work on the car and stuff like that. But there was the math teacher, Mr. Kaminsky, I was going to fail math. Like I wasn't into it. I was like, I really don't give a shit. Right. It's like you're grade 11. Like who really cares? I'm like, I got a job. I'm doing a thing. I'm top of the world. And our like year end final math project, right? They usually give you some sort of like management type tool that you got to use, right? Like you say you opened up an ice cream store and you sold X amount of ice cream cones, what's the taxes or whatever on it, right? But that year, Mr. Kaminsky chose to do an operations budget for a ski hill. And that just like, that got it going for me, man. And I was like, he taught me like how to do the taxes and all that kind of stuff, like how to run a business. And he would stay after hours with me. And like, I crushed that project, man. Like I didn't give a shit about the numbers before that. And that was someone, he was just like, you need to keep going with what you got going now. Like you have something here. So yeah, those are basically all the dudes I wanted to kind of get out there, pay respect to. And yeah.
So I guess
it's been a ride.
You had been practicing welding and everything. So like when Fun Farm, like you were doing welding for a long time. So once you did Fun Farm, it was like, you know, you were doing the perfection.
A lot of people don't know this about Fun Farm, but Fun Farm is not my full-time job. Okay. Yeah. And I would be blowing smoke up your asses to say that I'm even in the realm of being a heavy hitter in action sports, rails and stuff like that, right? Like you got guys like, you know, Arena and East Coast Jibs and all that kind of stuff like that, right? Like that's what those guys do, right? They're doing huge volume sales, all that kind of stuff. My full-time job is I run a fab shop. We have rig welders going, like we got 4 trucks going now, right? So that's my full-time job. So we do a lot of custom oil field stuff, like a lot of aluminum, stainless stuff that has engineered drawings. It has to be up to spec, up to code. Yeah. We do a lot of like commercial infrastructure, all sorts of stuff like that, plant work, everything. So when it comes to the snowboard rails and action sports features and stuff like that, I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I don't have to crunch the numbers as hardcore as I can just throw whatever man hours at it I want. I'm like, oh, I want to make this rail have some really cool like skid system underneath it so it doesn't fall over and you can just drag it up the hill, right? Like, is it cost effective? No, not really, but it's a passion project. So, and 100%. I just really I want to make sure that I take good care of the customers that I have. And the biggest thing to me is that I want to keep the manpower that I have. I want to keep those guys engaged in the trade, let them progress, make sure they got enough money, enough food, their bellies are full, their wives are happy, all that kind of stuff. So that's more of where my head is at. And a lot of I refer to this as, you know, some people go down the avenue of becoming, you know, a pro athlete or whatever, going all in. And sometimes I think about that, you know, did I not that I was ever in the realm of being a pro athlete, not at all, not even close. But you always, you know, as a middle-aged man, you're like, could I have done it? Or kind of thing. But welding and fabrication, that is what I went all in on. That's my endeavor that I can talk about, like, you know, check the mileage, you know, when it comes time to it and we get thrown a curveball, just medium vibes, man, just handle it. You're prepared. We have the resources and stuff like that. Like we do a lot of like waterline repair for resorts, mounting pumps, all sorts of shit, like fixing snowmaking equipment, right? So I just kind of want to get that out on the table as well.
So I guess when you first started welding, or like when you first tried it, your first weld was embarrassing, though. Well,
no.
When you first started welding, you had a perfect weld and everything.
No, definitely not perfect by any means, but not shitty. Like I'm not trying to blow smoke up my ass, but it has always been something that was just like I got this.
So you're like the Sean White of welding, like it just came naturally to you, or like the Connor McDavid, like it came.
Yeah, it definitely, it always has, and it's always been something that no matter how many welds I've done, it's always been engaging to me. It don't matter what process, like, you know, there's always that corny shit on Instagram, like find something you do for free and stick with that. Like I cannot
No.
tell you how many times in the Canadian Tire parking lot I fired up my rig and I've welded on like cherry bomb exhaust systems onto some kid's Honda Civic for them, right?
Yeah.
For free. Or, you know, like another thing we do a lot of is a lot of the kids that, you know, ride moto and they like smash up the pipe on their 85s and stuff like that, right? Well, we'll smash out all the
dents.
the dents for you, and we'll fix all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Free of charge, right? So when it comes to that, the welding world, I'm all in on it. I want to take in every aspect of that I can, and that's how I'm pushing the limits for myself and the people around me, and that's kind of what I'm bringing. But
no, and the kind of the reason I ask is like, you know, as an entrepreneur, I think a lot of people always get stuck on that perfection, and they're like, oh, I can't launch it, I can't do this, I can't do that. I need to have it 100% to perfection all the time, and then they never get to launching it. So that's kind of why, you know, I was asking, because like a lot of times people are like, oh, you know, I can't do this or that. But I found like, you know, we launched our product and I thought it was great, and then when the consumer plays with it, they're like, oh, I actually want this or that or that. So it's like, you know, you can never be stuck on perfection sometimes, because it's like, you know, you need to get it out there so you can practice and go further. But then
a lot of people too, they get hung up on that last like 10%. Okay. Like, I'm not saying, but for most things in life, 90%, that's the pinnacle. You know, that last 10%, you're picking fly shit out of pepper here. Like the general cut, the customer's not going to notice, right? And if they are, you're going to charge for it anyways, right? If that's your thing, taking it to 100% customer satisfaction, and you want to hold their hand through the whole process and all that kind of stuff like that, charge them for it, man. If they got the funds to pay for it, absolutely. But if you build a quality product and you know it's quality, and you're doing everything that you can as far as, you know, materials and supply and demand and customer service, and, you know, like a good handshake and eye contact on a deal, sticking to your price, don't be a cost plus vendor, right? Like, how many times have, you know, like the housing contractors, anything like that, they give you a price for 15 grand for concrete, and then it turns out to be a $22,000 bill. Like, don't be that guy. You know what I mean? Don't
100%.
undersell the job. Just stick to your roots, stick to what's right. You know it's right. It's going to perform well, and that's it. You do just fine. And don't drag scrap metal out to the resorts anymore.
100%. We're gonna make rail.
That's the villain in this.
Call
story.
Fun Farm and bring it. Don't bring scrapyard to your hill. But second last question, because as Alexis got to ask you a question, now it's your turn to ask our guest for next week's podcast a question. So David, epic MTB guy, down from Texas, what question do you want to ask him?
I got this written down. What did I say? In your opinion, what are you doing to keep the Stoke alive? That's the question I have to them. In your day-to-day life, whether it be work or daily life, what are you doing to keep the Stoke alive in the areas of life that matter to you?
As I type that down so I don't forget it.
There you go.
I think that's a great question. And, you know, I think it's for everyone. It's like, you know, you don't have to quit your 9 to 5 to go all in on your passion or like this. It's like, you know, be intentional with your day to day, figure out why, you know, you're working at, maybe your job isn't the most exciting thing, but you know, it gives you money to go buy a new bike every year if that's what matters to you, or, you know, go on vacation, or, you know, I think it's being more intentional every day and figuring out what that Stoke is so you can keep it alive. And then
and it's weird how that comes around too. Like, one scenario that I look at, I have 3 nephews now. Okay. And my nephews are they're awesome. But to see my brother and his wife nurture what action sports can bring to your life, and the happiness and the joy, but also the injuries and isolation in a sense like that, right? So like, to see them, to let them do their thing, grow, have the mistakes. And I look at my brother, like, we took his oldest boy to the mountain bike park for jumps and stuff like that, and he's on his little electric bike just cruising around, and like see him hitting jumps and stuff like that. And I look over, and my brother's like looking off into no man's land, like he can't even look at it, but that's what he's doing to facilitate the Stoke for his kid. It's just like, I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't want this ball of perfection that I made to get hurt, but I know what it's going to do later on. So I find that kind of funny.
Yeah, 100%. Can't see it, but go have fun. I'll take you there.
Totally. Yeah, it's uncle's problem now.
Yeah, it's the ambulance when they come. They'll fix you up. I won't. But I'll hold your hand for the ride to the hospital if anything happens. But lastly, podcast of Stoke Hunters, hunting the good days. What advice would you end with for people who might be having, not the best days, or, having back-to-back bad days, or just kind of being a little bit more in the funk? What would you tell them to try to get out of that or help them?
Hug your mom. Call your parents, tell them you love you. Everybody that you're around, let them know how you feel. Try not to like bottle that shit up, and just, don't think into it too hard about what people are thinking, and kind of break the mold a bit if you can. If you feel like you have something there, just go for it.
Yeah.
Like that's, it's a pretty cliche thing to say, but yeah.
Well, and I think, I think we're a similar generation when we talk about snowboarding and like the stuff we grew up with. But like, we didn't see that all the time, but it's like, or like, with ADD, I like learned to mask it, but it's like, embrace your weirdness. It's, if something you love, do it, and, do it unapologetically, because life's unfortunately short. I lost my mom in 17 days. So, at 61, so it can happen anytime. And, go tell your parents you love them. Go tell your friends that they matter. Like,
Absolutely.
They might be having a bad week, or, you don't know sometimes because we hide it a lot. But, you telling that person something like that, like it can go a long way.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yep. Yeah. Kill them with kindness, if anything.
100%. And that's how we'll wrap up this episode of Stoke Hunters. So I appreciate you spending the last 2 hours with me. I can't believe it flew by that fast. And
holy shit, that was quick. So hopefully some people around still. So right on. Okay, I don't know how to close this thing out, but I think I'm going to push this.
Just stay and I'll end it. But we had 8 people and we made it all the way up to 12 people. So that's been the highest highest live viewing. So I appreciate everyone who paid attention the whole way. Like, we have 7 people watching us right now. So thank you guys so much for being part of the good days, and see you guys all next week.
Yeah, absolutely.